Hi, this is Mr. Heineman from Evergreen High School. For my Microsoft Imagine Academy classes, this is Excel 2013 Core Lesson 1. So in Lesson 1, we're introducing Excel. And Excel is a spreadsheet tool that's used to create and manipulate large amounts of data. So we're going to learn the purpose of the spreadsheet. We'll learn about the ribbon and what's there, as well as kind of the layout of the Excel window. So like other Microsoft Office programs, Excel has a ribbon. And the ribbon has all the commands separated into tabs for groups of related to commands, and then those tabs are separated into groups of commands for specific purposes. The spreadsheet itself is separated into rows and columns. The columns are labeled with letters, and the rows are labeled with numbers. That means each individual part of the worksheet has an identification in terms of a column and a row. So it's always column then row. So this is cell A1, and we call them cells. So when we say cell, we mean one little piece of this. I can click to go to cells D2 or B4 or C6. I can also use the keyboard. Now when I use the keyboard, you're going to notice a dark box show up down here that's going to show my keystrokes. So you'll see what keys I'm actually pressing to make things happen in the spreadsheet. So certainly I can use the arrow keys to move around, and I can move around pretty easily. I can also use Enter and Tab. Tab will move right, and actually if I press Shift Tab, it'll move left. And so I can move left and right using Tab and Shift Tab. If I tab over several spots, several columns, and I hit Enter, you'll notice that when I hit Enter, instead of just going down one row in that column, it returned me to the column I started tabbing in. If I used the arrow keys and did that, it wouldn't do that. It would just go down one. But if I use Tab and then hit Enter, I'll move down to the next row, but in the column I started in. And if I hit Enter, I'll keep moving down. And of course, just like Shift Tab went backwards to the right, Shift Enter goes up. So when we move right or left, Tab to go right, Shift Tab to go left, Enter to move down, Shift Enter to move up. If I'm entering data, I can do Enter, Tab, 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 and then hit Enter, and I'll go back to the beginning of the wherever I started tabbing. That'll be very useful in one of the exercises coming up, because then we can enter data, and then every time we hit Enter, it goes back to the column we started in. So now we'll start doing the online exercises. So in this first online exercise, we're going to open up a file and then save it, and then we'll create a new workbook from a template and save that as well. So we're going to start by opening from the microsite student files. We'll open the expenses 2013 August workbook, and I'm going to move that to the right. And we're going to go ahead and save this as a file in my Excel folder. So I'm going to change the name to student at the end of it, and then once I finish that, click save, and I've saved it. And I'm going to go ahead and now we'll create a new file from a template. I'm going to use a budget template, so I'm going to search for a budget template, and we're going to scroll down until we find a budget template we like. Maybe just this simple budget. We'll create that. Again, move it to the right, and then we'll do a save as, and we'll save it in the same file folder. Well, this one's going to be called Green Souls Monthly Budget. Okay. So now that we've got those, I'm going to return to the expenses workbook, and we're going to look at some of the cells in here. There are 3 cell types that we kind of look at. There are labels, so anything with text in it is considered a label. It's telling you information about what the data is in the worksheet. There's also cells with values. You can see up here in the formula bar that there's a value, 28,150, even though it looks a little bit different here in the actual worksheet because it's formatted to look like currency. So there's labels, there's values, and then down here this looks like a value, but it's actually a formula because we entered in some commands to have Excel do some different things. And we'll get into those specifics later, but know that this is a formula that is used to calculate what this value is going to be. And so even though we see a value here, here's what's going on behind the scenes, is the way you could look at that. And so we'll leave these workbooks open for the next online exercise. So in this exercise, we're going to create a brand new workbook from scratch, and then we're going to enter some data in. So we're going to go to File, New, and we're going to create a blank workbook. And we'll move this also to the right. Before we start entering stuff, though, it's always a good idea to save. So we're going to save this as our CO2 emissions estimates student. And that way, all we have to do later on is just click save and we'll have all the data. So as I said earlier, we are going to, as we enter data, we can simply type in the data, and then when we finish, wherever we need to go next, we can use that key. So in this case, because the next thing I'm going to enter is on the next line, or in the next row, I should say, I'm going to hit enter each time, and then top 10 by country, million metric ton. And then I hit enter. I'm going to go over to emissions and enter that. And now when I start in 4, this time now after each entry I'm going to hit tab, because that will move me to the right one column, and then I can enter whatever it is I need to enter. And then when I get to this last column, when I'm finished in it, I hit enter and it'll move me down to the next row, but back to column A. So then I can enter my data, and I'm using the number pad to do that. It's a good idea to learn how to use the number pad. It makes entering data a lot quicker. And there's a enter key right by the number pad there, so it makes it easy to hit enter when you need it. 1978, Russia, 1704, 0.36, 12 even. India is 1293.17, 1.16. Japan is 1246.76, 9.78. Germany is 857.6, 10.4. And then Canada, 614.33, 18.81. And even if you accidentally press tab a couple of times, if you hit enter, it'll just move you back to where you need to be anyway. So it's the nice thing about using tab and using it consistently, is that you will always, if you hit enter, end up back where you started. And that makes entering data a lot easier than using the arrow keys, because when you use the arrow keys, it doesn't move you back, and then you have to use the arrow keys again to get you back, and so on. Okay. 1.48 and 7.25, and then I'm going to go ahead and go down here to 18, and we'll add our little citation of where the data is from. So www.ucsusa.org, and then we call it the Union of Concerned Scientists. Okay. And then you notice here that South Korea is cut off, and other places where there's not data in the columns next to those cells, like A1 here, the data that I entered, or the information, in this case the label I entered, will go across cells, except when there is data in the next cell over, like with South Korea. So I'm actually going to stretch this over to be able to show the whole name South Korea. Just a little thing. When we get there, we can go ahead and save it, and we're ready to move on to the next exercise. So in this next exercise, we're going to create a new document from a template, which we've already done before, but we're going to use some different parts of creating a template in this case. So I'm going to go click File New, and then up here I'm going to search for calendars. And it's going to find me all the calendars. I'm going to make sure that I want specifically annual calendars. These will give me the year at a glance type calendars that I'm looking for. And I'll use this playful calendar for any year and click Create. And I notice that when it loads up, it's loaded for the year 2013. So I'm going to change that to 2017 for the current year. And then I can save as. And we'll just save this in the Excel folder as yearly calendar student. And that's all there is for this one. So we're now going to start the creative applications. And remember, the creative applications are a chance for you to use your skills to show what you can do in Excel without so much specific steps to follow. So in this case, we're going to be adding some data into a worksheet in a workbook. So we're going to open that workbook first from the microsite student files. We're going to open up the passenger manifest workbook. And then, of course, once we move it to the right, the first thing we're going to do is save this as our student version of the file. So it's passenger manifest. I'm just going to add student on the end. And then I click Save, and there we are. We've saved it. Now all we have to do is when we're ready to save it after we've entered the data, we can just click Save up here. So in this case, we're going to be paying attention to autocorrect and trying to take advantage of that whenever we can. Autocorrect will examine the cells above whatever cell you're in to see, is there anything that as you type looks like what you're trying to type, and then it'll ask you if you want to autocorrect by putting it into the cell for you. So of course, when I very first start, it's not going to autocorrect anything, at least not unless I type something with an L. So so this first setup is not going to give me any choice for autocorrect. But then the next one may, but it doesn't look like it's going to, because the autocorrect only pays attention to what you're typing, will only give you suggestions based on letters that you type that are common to words above. So now when I type B, I notice it notices that there's a Bamberger up here, and it's going to ask if I want to use Bamberger here, and I do. So I'm just going to tab different first name, so we're going to just type that in. Again, with German, same thing. I type a G, it recognizes there's German above that, and autocorrects that for me, so I'm going to tab over on that one. 23 October 86. You notice it doesn't autocorrect with numbers because those numbers could mean different things, so it's not going to autocorrect with numbers, only with text. And again, as I typed the S for Scott, it showed me an autocorrect for Sean. I don't want that. I want Scott, so I just kept typing. And that's, if you don't want to use the autocorrect, that's all you need to do is just keep typing and ignore it. And it'll let you type whatever you want to type. So now this one, when I start typing the B again, it thinks I want Bamberger. I actually want Bjornstad, so I just keep typing. And I'm just going to continue entering my data. Bjornstad, so it takes until I get to the BJ before I will see an autocorrect, and then I can tab over. And then with Swedish, same thing. And if you keep typing and it still matches a word, it will continue with the same autocorrect text. So now I'm just adding in the last of my data. And that completes it. So now I can just click save and then close the workbook, and I'm done with this activity. So in this last exercise for lesson 1, we're going to create our own worksheet to make a plan to save money for a trip. So let's go ahead and create a new blank workbook, and we'll get started. This is our personal expenses, and we're really saving for a trip. Okay, and then here is where we're going to have our income, and our income, we're going to start, well, today is what? November. So let's start in November, and then we can go a year from there. What's nice is that autofill will fill these for me. So if I start with December, I can go all the way to next October, and there's my year. I can also select all of these and resize them the size I want. That'll fit everything. So that way I can make sure that all of the months fit. According to our setup here, we have a monthly income of 1,000. So I'm going to enter 1,000 into there and then use autofill for the rest of it, because I know it's going to be the same every month. And we'll plan this out for a year to begin with. I know it says 2 years in our problem, but we'll just plan out for a year first and then go from there. So we have some expenses, right? We have rent. Rent is fixed at $400, so kind of like what we did earlier. Go back here and we'll autofill all the way to next October. Our transit is fixed. That's at $75, so we're going to have that throughout the entire year. And the same thing with groceries. We're budgeting $200 for groceries. Okay. Also, we should have like a miscellaneous category for incidental things. And we can throw in some numbers, you know, $100 here, $150 there, maybe $200 around the holiday time. Maybe it goes back down to $150 for a while. Maybe in July, because we want to take a big, or we want to use, we have more birthdays that we have to deal with or whatever. We can have it be more. So now I've got that. I'm also going to add a label for total expenses. We're not going to get to figuring that out yet, but we want to know what total expenses, and we also will need to know what money we have available after our total expenses. I'm going to resize A so that it's big enough to fit the money available label. And that's pretty much it. We can go ahead and save this as a it's our personal expenses, and this is in lesson 1, and I think we're going to reuse this later. So we're going to label it with lesson 1, and then I'm going to put my name, and then I can save it and close it, and then we're done with lesson 1.